Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. Today, we're putting a magnifying glass on a technology that's quietly but fundamentally rewriting the rules of global military engagement: hypersonic missiles.
Mhm.
Forget everything you thought you knew about missile defense, because the very foundations of strategic stability are now shifting underfoot.
That's right.
We're talking about weapons that don't just move at incredible speeds, but dance unpredictably through the atmosphere, making them a truly disruptive force for international security.
Indeed. Our mission today is to thoroughly unpack these formidable systems. We'll delve into what makes them so profoundly different from previous generations of weaponry, which nations are leading the charge in their development, and critically,
And what it all means.
exactly, what this monumental technological leap means for you, for global security, and for the future of conflict. This isn't merely a discussion about faster weapons. It's about a fundamental shift in the balance of power, a stark increase in the potential for miscalculation, and the urgent imperative to understand this new and, frankly, volatile reality.
We've gathered a stack of recent analyses, academic reports, defense briefings, basically everything we could get our hands on to give you a clear, no-nonsense look at what's happening on this rapidly evolving frontier. So, let's get right into the heart of this urgent topic. Okay, let's unpack this. We hear hypersonic, and, we think fast, but what is a hypersonic missile, truly? What sets it apart from missiles we've seen before?
Right. Well, the term hypersonic technically refers to anything traveling at speeds of Mach 5 or greater,
Mach 5.
5 times the speed of sound.
Oh,
To put that in perspective, that's roughly 1.6 kilometers per second.
wow.
And this isn't just some arbitrary number picked for effect. It's a critical threshold where the physics of flight fundamentally change.
How so?
Well, at these extreme velocities, a whole new range of profound physical phenomena become the dominant engineering challenges. We're talking about the air ahead of the vehicle being compressed so rapidly.
Just ramming into it.
Exactly, ramming into it so hard it heats up to thousands of degrees, well over 3,000 Fahrenheit, or about 1648 Celsius.
That's incredible heat.
And it's not momentary heat like re-entry. This is a sustained thermal load. It pushes the absolute limits of material science. Plus, the vehicle itself is under immense structural stress. Conventional materials, they just can't handle it.
Okay, but you hear about ballistic missiles being fast too, right? Even faster sometimes.
That's a crucial point. Speed, raw speed is definitely a factor, but it's not the only thing, maybe not even the primary differentiator here.
Right.
Traditional intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, they've been around for decades. They actually reach higher peak speeds during re-entry, sometimes Mach 25 or even more.
So if it's not just speed, what's the real game changer?
It's what they can do at those speeds within the atmosphere. That's the core of it. The crucial distinction for this modern class of weapon is its capacity for sustained, controlled, and unpredictable flight within the atmosphere.
Okay, sustained and controlled, unlike a ballistic missile.
Precisely. A ballistic missile, once the booster burns out, mostly follows a predictable arc through space, right? Like throwing a ball very, very high.
Predictable trajectory.
Yes. Hypersonic weapons, on the other hand, use aerodynamic forces lift, like an airplane's wing, to maneuver while inside the atmosphere. They can perform significant evasive maneuvers, change altitude, change direction, constantly.
So they're actively flying, not just falling.
They are actively flying, dancing through the upper atmosphere. And that sustained maneuverability, that unpredictability, that's the defining characteristic. It's what makes them such an unprecedented threat to existing defenses, which rely on predicting that ballistic arc.
Got it. And within this category, you mentioned there are different types.
Broadly speaking, yes. Two main types people talk about. First, you have hypersonic glide vehicles, or HGVs.
Glide vehicle, so unpowered.
Essentially, yes, unpowered during the glide phase. They're initially launched by a conventional rocket booster, just like a ballistic missile.
Okay.
But instead of following that high arc into space, the HGV warhead separates from the booster at a high altitude and then glides back down through the upper atmosphere.
Glides and maneuvers.
Glides and maneuvers, performing complex evasive moves, changing course, altitude, trying to confuse defenses all the way down. Examples: Russia's Avanguard system, they claim incredible speeds, Mach 20 plus, and China's DFZF, reportedly operating between Mach 5 and 10.
So they get a big initial kick from the rocket.
A huge kick. But then, as they glide through the atmosphere, they do bleed energy due to aerodynamic drag. especially as they get lower toward the target, so their speed isn't constant.
Okay, so those are the HGVs, the gliders. What's the other main type?
The other key type, and arguably even more technologically challenging, are the Hypersonic Cruise Missiles, or HCMs.
Cruise missiles, so they're powered.
Powered throughout their entire flight. That's the key difference. They use advanced air-breathing engines called scramjets.
Scramjets, right.
Think of Russia's 3M-22 Zircon, reportedly hitting Mach 8 or 9, or the U.S. Hypersonic Attack Cruise Missile, the HACM, which is in advanced development.
And how do they fly compared to HGVs?
HCMs typically operate at somewhat lower altitudes than HGVs, maybe 20 to 30 kilometers up. Because they're continuously powered, they can sustain more complex, extended maneuvering over longer distances.
But there's always a trade-off, isn't there?
Always. HCMs are generally slower than the peak speeds HGVs reach, since HGVs get that massive initial boost. And HCMs often have shorter ranges because, well, they have to carry their own engine and fuel, which adds weight and complexity.
And just to make it more confusing, there are hybrids too, things that don't fit neatly in either box.
Absolutely. Russia's KH-47M2 Kinzhal is a perfect example. It's often called hypersonic, and it's definitely fast Mach 10 reported. But technically, it's an air-launched ballistic missile. Basically, a modified Iskander ground-launched missile strapped to a jet like the MiG-31K.
So it gets speed from the rocket motor after launch from the air.
Yes. It follows more of a ballistic path, though it can apparently perform some evasive maneuvers in the terminal phase. But some Western analysts argue it doesn't have that sustained atmospheric agility of a true HGV or HCM. It's maybe a more pragmatic way to get high speed by adapting existing tech.
So let's bottom line this for the listener. The core difference between these new weapons and traditional ballistic missiles, how they fly and why it matters strategically. Maybe an analogy helps.
Okay, think of a ballistic missile like throwing a football really high. It goes up, follows a predictable arc, and comes down. Easy to track, relatively speaking, once it's launched.
You know where it's going.
Pretty much.
Right.
Now, imagine that football could suddenly dip, weave, change direction at incredible speed, flying low through the trees instead of high in the air. That's kind of like a hypersonic weapon.
Much harder to predict, much harder to intercept.
Exactly. The sources we looked at, like the Congressional Research Service reports, show this clearly. Hypersonic weapons fly much lower within the upper atmosphere. It's a depressed trajectory.
And that low flight path is key.
Crucial. It keeps them below the optimal view of many space-based early warning satellites, which are looking for those high-arching ballistic launches.
Oh, okay.
And maybe even more importantly, it keeps them below the horizon of ground-based radar systems for a much longer portion of their flight.
So you literally can't see them coming until they're much, much closer.
Dramatically closer, which means dramatically less warning time for the defender to react. Minutes, potentially.
And that's the fundamental strategic trade-off, isn't it? It's not just about being faster. It's trading some potential top speed for
survivability and defense penetration. They are explicitly designed to exploit the blind spots, the gaps, in existing missile defenses built over decades to counter predictable threats. They're designed to get through.
Which makes them a truly unique challenge, a whole new dimension to strategic stability. So it's crystal clear these aren't just incremental improvements, they're a different beast entirely. And inevitably, this has sparked a global arms race. Who are the main players duking it out in this high-stakes arena?
It is definitely a global competition, but there's a clear top tier. Well, other countries are rapidly getting involved. The primary race, the nations pouring enormous resources and brainpower into this, are China, Russia, and the United States.
The big three?
The big three. They're really leading the charge, pushing the technological boundaries.
And China, in particular, seems to be making a monumental push. They see this as absolutely critical, don't they? For regional conflicts, for deterrence. The Pentagon was highlighting their focus on HGVs years ago.
Oh, absolutely. China's program is remarkably advanced and very comprehensive. They've already fielded several operational systems, which arguably gives them a lead in certain areas right now.
Like what specifically?
Well, their most prominent system is probably the DF-17. It's a road-mobile, medium-range ballistic missile, but it's specifically designed to carry their HGV, the DF-ZF.
And the DF-ZF?
The DF-ZF HGV reportedly has a range between 1,600 and 2,400 kilometers, hitting speeds of Mach 5 to 10. And critically, it's described as having high maneuverability and accuracy. It was apparently fielded back in 2020.
Already operational.
Already operational. They also tested something called the Starry Sky 2, or Xingkong 2, back in 2018. That's a hypersonic cruise missile, range maybe 700, 800 kilometers, Mach 6 speed. It uses a wave rider design, very advanced aerodynamics, using its own shockwave for lift. Some think it could be an anti-ship weapon soon.
And they're putting these HGVs on other missiles, too.
There are strong indications, yes, potentially, on their existing DF-21 and DF-26 theater ballistic missiles. Even their big DF-41 ICBM could potentially carry an HGV warhead. And they're not stopping there. They're developing air-launched systems like the YJ-21 anti-ship missile and pushing hard on scramjet engines like the Lingyan one for future cruise missiles.
The sheer pace of their testing is something else, isn't it? The reports mention stunning pace.
That pace is staggering. One report noted that in 2019 alone, China launched more ballistic missiles for testing and training than the rest of the world combined.
Incredible.
And hundreds of hypersonic-related tests between 2016 and 2021. It's not just about showing off technology. It reveals a clear strategic intent to rapidly integrate these weapons into their military doctrine, especially for the Indo-Pacific. It changes the whole calculus for potential conflicts there.
Right, holding high-value assets like carriers at risk in a new way. Now, Russia, they've been very vocal, haven't they, explicitly framing their hypersonic weapons as a way to counter U.S. missile defenses.
They have been extremely vocal. And they've also deployed several operational systems, some specifically designed, as you say, to defeat modern defenses. The Avanguard system is probably their most strategically significant.
The nuclear-capable one.
Yes, a nuclear-capable HGV launched by an ICBM. Claims of Mach 20-plus speeds range over 6,000 kilometers. It officially entered combat duty in December 2019. Its explicit purpose, to render U.S. homeland missile defenses obsolete.
A direct counter.
A direct counter. Then there's the 3M-22 Zircon. That's a ship-launched hypersonic cruise missile. Max range around 1,000 kilometers, or 625 miles. It was famously deployed on the frigate Admiral Gorshkov in January 2023. That marked the first known fielding of a shipboard hypersonic weapon.
And that's in use in Ukraine?
Reports suggest limited use in Ukraine, yes, which underscores its operational status. And then, of course, there's the Kinzhal, the air-launched one we talked about.
The modified Iskander?
Right. Mach 10 range up to maybe 1,900 kilometers, air-launched from the MiG-31K. Also nuclear-capable. It's been used multiple times in Ukraine. Though, again, analysts debate its true HGV-like agility. More recently, they announced this Oreshnik missile, a new intermediate-range ballistic missile, also claimed to be hypersonic, Mach 10 plus 8, and reportedly already used in combat and in mass production.
So Russia has fielded multiple systems, some nuclear, some conventional, across different launch platforms. Now, the U.S., they haven't actually fielded any operational hypersonic weapons yet, publicly at least.
Not publicly, no.
But the investment is enormous. We saw the Pentagon's budget for hypersonics just explode from $350 million in 2016 to $3.8 billion in 2020, hitting $4.7 billion in 2023. That's a massive ramp up. They're clearly trying to catch up, or perhaps leapfrog.
It's definitely a top national security priority. And the U.S. approach is interesting because it largely emphasizes developing highly accurate conventional hypersonic weapons.
Which you mentioned is technically harder.
Much harder, potentially. We'll get into why later. The Navy's main effort is the Conventional Prompt Strike, or CPS, program that's heavily funded, aiming for deployment on submarines and destroyers maybe as early as 2025. The idea is a rapid, non-nuclear global strike capability.
And the Army.
The Army has its long-range hypersonic weapon, LRHW, sometimes called Dark Eagle. That's a ground-launched system for theater operations. And critically, both the Navy's CPS and the Army's LRHW use the same core components. The Common Hypersonic Glide Body, CHGB, and a common booster. That's smart engineering trying to streamline development.
It makes sense. What about the Air Force?
The Air Force is focused on air-launched systems. Their main push now seems to be the Hypersonic Attack Cruise Missile, HCM. That's a scramjet-powered weapon, closely related to the Sci-Fire program they're doing with Australia.
Sci-Fire, right.
An earlier Air Force program, the AGM-183 ARRW, the Air-Launched Rapid Response Weapon, that had some very public struggles. Mixed flight tests nearly got canceled. But reports say it's been revived for more work. Shows the urgency, perhaps.
So multiple programs across different services, common components. What else is in the U.S. pipeline?
DARPA, the Defense Research Agency, is always involved in cutting-edge stuff. They successfully wrapped up the Hypersonic Air-Breathing Weapon Concept, HAWC, program early in 2023. That tech is feeding into follow-on programs like MOHA-CT. They also have OpFires, Operational Fires, which is a ground-launched boost glide system. And the Navy is working on HALO Hypersonic Air-Launched Offensive Anti-Surface, specifically designed to take out ships.
Targeting those high-value naval assets again.
Exactly. It's all about holding adversary forces at risk.
But crucially, this isn't just a three-way race anymore, is it? The technology is spreading. Other nations are jumping in.
That's a really critical point. It's proliferating. India is actively working on the BrahMos II cruise missile with Russia, and they have their own Shaurya missile. Their hypersonic technology demonstrator vehicle, the HSTDV, hit Mach 6 in tests. They even have a dedicated HSTDV test facility now. Shows serious indigenous effort.
France, Japan.
France tested its VMAX HGV for the first time in 2023. Japan is developing the Hypervelocity Gliding Projectile, HVGP, specifically for island defense they plan to deploy around 2026. That's a significant shift in their defense posture.
And Australia is working with the U.S.
Yes, on the SI-Fire Scramjet program. North Korea claims they tested the Hwasong-8 HGV, but, verification is difficult. Iran unveiled its Fatah-1, claimed hypersonic, but experts mostly think it's likely a maneuvering ballistic missile, not a true HGV or HCM.
So South Korea, Germany, the UK, they're all looking into it too.
They are. Research programs, development efforts. It's clear this technology is seen as the future, and many nations feel they can't afford to be left behind. It's truly a global phenomenon now.
Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really fascinating. The sheer difficulty. Why is this so incredibly hard? What are the engineering nightmares you have to conquer to make something fly reliably at Mach 5+ and still be able to maneuver?
You called it an engineering gauntlet earlier, and that's exactly what it is. It's one of the most profound challenges in modern engineering. The extreme physics involved create this incredibly hostile environment. It pushes materials, propulsion, guidance, everything to their absolute limits.
And these problems aren't separate, right? They feed into each other.
Deeply interconnected. Solving one problem, like heat, can often make another, like control, even harder. It demands innovation across multiple scientific fields simultaneously.
Let's start with the most obvious one, the heat. We touched on it, over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. How do you stop the weapon from just vaporizing?
Right, surviving the heat is the single biggest obstacle. And it's the sustained nature of it that's brutal. At Mach 5+, the air compression at the leading edges generates these incredible temperatures, hotter than lava.
And it stays that hot for minutes.
Potentially tens of minutes, depending on the flight profile. This isn't like the brief, intense heat of atmospheric re-entry for a spacecraft. This is prolonged thermal soaking. Most conventional metals would melt. Advanced alloys deform. Composites weaken and fail. The whole structural integrity is at risk.
So what materials can even withstand that? Sounds like science fiction stuff.
It requires truly exotic materials. We're talking advanced ceramics, carbon composites similar to what was used on the Space Shuttle's nose cone and leading edges, and other specialized superalloys designed specifically for extreme thermal resistance.
And just the materials aren't enough, presumably?
No, you also need sophisticated thermal shielding. Sometimes ablative shields are used, materials designed to char and flake away in a controlled manner, carrying heat away from the structure. Think of how a meteor burns up. Other approaches involve complex internal cooling systems, circulating coolants through the missile's skin or around critical components, like a high-performance car engine's radiator, but operating under vastly more extreme conditions.
Okay, so you manage the heat, maybe. What about just keeping the thing stable and pointed the right way? Steering must be incredibly difficult.
Aerodynamic stability. Yeah, it's a complete nightmare. The physics of airflow at hypersonic speeds are fundamentally different. You get this incredibly powerful shock wave forming ahead of the vehicle.
Like a sonic boom, but part of the flight.
Exactly, but far more intense and directly interacting with the vehicle's surfaces. This creates a boundary layer of superheated, chemically altered air, sometimes called the shock layer. It's like this volatile, plasma-like cushion enveloping the missile.
Plasma-like? That sounds unstable.
Extremely. Imagine trying to steer a speedboat through boiling, turbulent rapids. That shock layer makes aerodynamic control incredibly difficult and unpredictable.
And if that airflow changes suddenly?
If the flow transitions unexpectedly from smooth, laminar flow to chaotic, turbulent flow within that shock layer, catastrophic things can happen. You could lose flight stability completely, send the vehicle tumbling, or it could create localized hotspots where temperatures spiked dramatically, potentially burning right through the structure, even with the best thermal protection.
So how do designers even approach this?
It requires an exceptionally deep understanding of hypersonic fluid dynamics, massive amounts of supercomputing power, computational fluid dynamics, CFD modeling, trying to predict and control these incredibly complex interactions. It's often said that at these speeds, the air itself behaves like a different kind of fluid entirely.
Okay, heat control. What about actually telling it where to go? Communications and guidance seem like they'd be impossible with all that heat and plasma.
Yes, the plasma sheath. Another huge problem. The extreme heat is so intense it ionizes the surrounding air, strips electrons off the atoms. This creates an electrically charged cloud of plasma that wraps around the vehicle.
Like a shield.
An electromagnetic shield, effectively. It acts like a Faraday cage. It absorbs radio waves, reflects them, distorts them.
So, no GPS, no commands from the ground. How does it navigate? How does it hit anything accurately?
Exactly. It can cause a severe communications blackout. Blocking GPS signals means the missile loses its precise positioning. Blocking command updates means you can't easily retarget it in flight, which is crucial for hitting moving targets like ships.
That sounds crippling for a precision weapon. What are the workarounds?
They are incredibly complex. Engineers are developing specialized radomes, windows on the missile made of materials that are both extremely heat-resistant and somehow transparent to radio waves at specific frequencies. That's a huge material science challenge.
Or changing how it flies.
Yes, designing unique flight profiles, like a skip-glide trajectory where the vehicle periodically pops up out of the densest part of the atmosphere, momentarily escaping the worst of the plasma sheath to reacquire a satellite link, then dips back down.
But that adds complexity, uses energy.
It does. It complicates the mission planning and consumes valuable energy needed for range and maneuvering.
This is an incredible balancing act. Everything inside computers, sensors, wiring needs to be tiny for performance, but also tough enough to survive the heat, the vibrations, the G-forces. That's another huge materials challenge, right?
It's absolutely at the frontier of material science and microelectronics. Every single internal component faces this dual, often contradictory demand. Aggressive miniaturization reducing size, weight, and power swap is essential. Every gram saved means more range, speed, or maneuverability.
But
But these tiny components also have to be incredibly robust. They need to function perfectly while being shaken violently by the engine, crushed by G-forces during maneuvers, and baked by the heat radiating from the airframe. It demands a new generation of lightweight superalloys, advanced composites, radiation-hardened electronics, components that maintain their integrity and function in this brutal environment.
And this focus on precision, on making conventional warheads work despite all these challenges, sounds like a big reason the U.S. programs might seem slower or have faced more testing hurdles compared to Russia or China.
That's a really critical point, and it often gets glossed over. Think about it. A nuclear warhead has an enormous blast radius. It can be effective even if it misses the exact aim point by hundreds of meters, maybe even more.
Close enough is good enough for nuclear.
Pretty much. But a conventional warhead needs pinpoint accuracy. We're talking within meters to reliably destroy a specific hardened target, like a bunker or a command node, or damage a ship effectively.
So the accuracy demands are much higher.
Much, much higher. And achieving that accuracy requires guidance and control systems that operate with near-perfect reliability through that plasma sheath while enduring the stresses of terminal maneuvering without losing their lock on the target. It places a vastly higher technical burden on the system compared to a less accurate nuclear payload. This definitely helps explain some of the testing difficulties and perhaps the more deliberate pace you see in U.S. conventional hypersonic programs. They're aiming for a level of precision under extreme duress that other nations, focusing more on nuclear delivery, might not be prioritizing to the same degree.
Right. So we've looked at the tech, the players, the sheer difficulty. Now let's zoom out, the big picture. What does the arrival of these weapons actually mean for the global balance of power? How do they fundamentally change the game of international stability?
Look, hypersonic weapons aren't just another incremental step. They are a genuinely disruptive force. They fundamentally alter the strategic calculations that nations make. They erode security frameworks that have been in place for decades. It's a profound change in the nature of modern warfare, really.
And maybe the most immediate, most unsettling impact is how they crush decision timelines.
That is absolutely the most immediate and destabilizing effect. That unique combination, extreme speed, plus that low maneuvering flight path, it means a defending nation might have only minutes from reliable detection to impact.
Minutes, not hours.
Minutes. For a target like Washington, D.C., analysts estimate a hypersonic missile launched thousands of miles away might offer only 10 to 15 minutes of warning, maybe less. This puts almost unbearable pressure on national leaders, on military commanders.
The pressure must be immense, making potentially world-ending decisions with almost no time, maybe incomplete information. The potential for miscalculation seems terrifyingly high.
It is terrifyingly high. Think about a crisis situation. Tensions are already high. A sensor glitch, a misinterpreted signal, a malfunctioning test could be mistaken for an actual attack.
And you don't know if it's conventional or nuclear?
You don't know the payload. You might not know the exact target immediately because it's maneuvering. Do you launch a retaliatory strike based on uncertain data to avoid being wiped out? It could lead to a catastrophic chain of events, as some reports put it. Accidental escalation becomes a much more real possibility because there's simply no time for deliberation, for checking, for de-escalation. The old Cold War fear of launch on warning gets dialed up to 11.
And these weapons aren't just fast, they're specifically designed to beat the defenses we've spent billions on, right?
Explicitly designed for that purpose. Those multi-billion-dollar missile defense systems, built over decades, are largely optimized for tracking predictable, high-arching ballistic missile trajectories. Hypersonics exploit the gaps.
How exactly?
Their low altitude keeps them under the radar horizon for longer. Their unpredictable maneuvering makes them incredibly hard to track accurately enough for an interceptor to hit them, even if detected. They can potentially penetrate even the most heavily defended airspace.
Which puts what at risk?
High-value targets, aircraft carriers, forward military bases, critical command and control nodes, things that were previously thought relatively safe behind layers of defense are now potentially vulnerable in new ways. This ability to overcome what's called anti-accessoria denial, A2AD, defenses basically, defenses designed to keep forces out of a region, is a key driver for their development. It's like a key to kick down the door in a potential conflict.
And then there's the payload problem, the ambiguity. That adds another layer of danger, doesn't it?
The deeply destabilizing layer. Many of these systems are dual capable. They can carry either a conventional high-explosive warhead or a nuclear warhead. And for the nation under attack.
You can't tell which it is until it hits.
Exactly. It's virtually impossible to determine the payload type until after detonation.
Which creates this absolutely nightmarish dilemma for the leadership on the receiving end. Do you assume the worst nuclear and retaliate in kind, risking global nuclear war? Or do you hesitate, assume it's conventional, and risk a decapitating strike that cripples your ability to respond at all?
It's an impossible choice, and that calculated ambiguity is itself a weapon. It's a powerful tool of psychological coercion designed to paralyze an opponent's decision-making, make them hesitate, make them afraid to respond forcefully to conventional aggression for fear of nuclear escalation.
And this fundamentally undermines the old logic of deterrence, doesn't it? Mutually assured destruction, MA.
It absolutely threatens to erode the foundations of MA. MADI worked, arguably, because both sides knew with high certainty that any nuclear-first strike would result in their own annihilation through a guaranteed retaliatory strike. But if hypersonic weapons offer even the perception of a potential swift, disarming first strike, taking out an adversary's command structure or retaliatory forces with little warning, it undermines that certainty of retaliation.
So it shifts the thinking.
It shifts strategic thinking away from deterrence by punishment. I won't attack you because you'll destroy me, in return towards a much more aggressive posture of deterrence by denial. I can attack you because I can potentially stop you from effectively striking back. This kind of thinking lowers the threshold for considering preemptive attacks, making crises inherently more unstable and dangerous.
And inevitably, this feels into the classic security dilemma, driving a new arms race.
Precisely. It's a textbook security dilemma. One state develops these weapons, perhaps claiming they're for defense or deterrence. Rivals see it as an offensive threat and feel compelled to develop their own capabilities in response. Then the first state sees that as a threat and builds more. It's a vicious cycle.
We've seen it play out already, haven't we? U.S. leaves the ABM treaty leading missile defenses. Russia and China ramp up offensive systems to overcome potential defenses. Now the U.S. pours billions into hypersonics to counter them.
It's a continuous action-reaction cycle, just as our sources describe. And it has real economic consequences, too. Military spending is soaring globally. That Pentagon budget for hypersonics, $350 million to $4.7 billion in just 7 years, that's a huge amount of resources being poured into this race.
And the proliferation beyond the big three just adds fuel to the fire.
Absolutely. Regional rivalries get intensified. The sources mention the potential for Pakistan acquiring these capabilities against India that adds a terrifying new dimension to an already nuclearized standoff. We see Japan, traditionally pacifist, now actively developing potentially offensive hypersonic capabilities due to perceived regional threats. It's a global trend.
And the psychological impact, the perception of falling behind.
That cannot be understated. The threat of an adversary having a superior capability, even if it's not fully operational or its effectiveness is uncertain, heavily impacts strategic planning and national psyche. History is full of examples. Think about the dreadnought race before World War I, or the bomber gap and missile gap scares during the Cold War. The perception of a gap, real or imagined, can drive incredibly destabilizing arms races and political decisions. The very existence of these weapons changes the game.
So the offense is evolving at breakneck speed, creating these huge strategic challenges. What about the defense? Is there any hope of stopping these things, or are they truly the invincible super weapons some headlines proclaim?
Well, countering this threat requires a fundamental pivot in missile defense thinking. It's a monumental and incredibly costly effort, demanding a shift, particularly towards relying much more heavily on space-based systems and entirely new interceptor technologies. The old ways just won't cut it.
Because ground-based radars have that horizon problem, right? They can't see low-flying targets far away.
Exactly. Earth's curvature limits their line of sight. So the foundation of any effective future defense must be a robust network of sensors in space. The U.S. Space Development Agency, SDA, is building what they call the Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture, PWSA. The plan involves hundreds, potentially over 550, satellites providing global, persistent missile tracking.
Hundreds of satellites just for tracking.
Yes, forming a layered network. First, you have wide field of view, WFOV, sensors. These are like the tripwires constantly scanning large areas with infrared sensors, looking for the heat signature of missile launches. They provide the initial warning.
Okay, the first alert. Then what?
Then, using data from the WFOV sensors, you cue the medium field of view, MFOV, sensors. These are systems like the Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor, HBTSS. They're more sensitive, they can zoom in and provide much more precise tracking data. Crucially, they aim to provide fire control quality data.
Meaning data good enough to actually guide an interceptor.
Precisely. Detailed enough to calculate the target's trajectory, predict its maneuvers, and guide a defensive weapon to intercept it.
So it's an entirely new surveillance network in space. That's a massive undertaking.
Monumental. And they're also looking at alternative sensor types, maybe ultraviolet or hyperspectral sensors that could detect the unique chemical trails or plasma wakes left by hypersonic vehicles. More ways to see them.
And all this data needs to get where it needs to go instantly.
Which requires the PWSA's transport layer, hundreds more satellites acting as communication nodes, creating a resilient mesh network in space to relay that critical tracking data down to interceptors and command centers in near real time. It's like building a whole new global nervous system for defense.
Okay, so you can potentially track them better from space, but then you have to actually hit something moving that fast and unpredictably. That brings us to the Glide Phase Interceptor, GPI. That sounds like a new kind of weapon.
It is. The thinking is that the best window to engage an HGV is during its mid-course glide phase, when it's relatively high up in the upper atmosphere, before it starts its final, potentially more aggressive terminal maneuvers. The GPI is being developed specifically for this. It's designed to be a high-performance interceptor, likely launched from Navy Aegis warships, maybe land sites too.
So launching a hypersonic weapon to kill a hypersonic weapon.
Essentially, yes. You need to match its speed and agility to have a chance. The GPI would fly up into the upper atmosphere and engage the maneuvering HGV there.
And this is an area of international cooperation.
Yes, significantly. The U.S. and Japan have formally agreed to co-develop the GPI. It highlights how seriously both nations view this threat, pooling resources for this incredibly complex challenge.
Because hitting it directly, hit to kill, must be insanely difficult at those speeds.
Incredibly difficult, which is why developers are also exploring alternative approaches, like area effect warheads for the interceptors.
Area effect,
Yeah.
like a shotgun.
Kind of like a massive shotgun blast in space, yes. Instead of needing a direct collision, the interceptor would detonate near the target, releasing a cloud of lethal fragments into its path. The goal isn't a direct hit, but getting close enough to shred control surfaces, damage the structure, disrupt its guidance, basically cause a mission kill without needing that perfect impact.
So space tracking, new interceptors like GPI. What else is in the defensive toolkit? Are existing systems being upgraded?
Definitely. A layered defense is crucial. No single system will be perfect. So alongside developing new mid-course capabilities, there's a strong focus on bolstering terminal defense, the last line of defense as the weapon approaches its target.
Using systems we already have.
Upgrading systems we already have, like the Army's Patriot PAC-3, the Navy's Aegis Sea-based terminal SBT interceptors, and the Thieves Sea system. enhancing their software, their seekers, their maneuverability to give them a better chance of intercepting hypersonic threats in that final phase.
Hmm.
Right now, Aegis SBT is considered the only active, though still limited, defense with some capability against certain hypersonic threats, mainly in their terminal phase.
Looking further out, are there more exotic defenses being considered? Lasers, cyber.
Those are definitely being explored. Directed energy weapons, high-power lasers, or high-power microwaves offer the future potential of damaging flight controls or frying the sensitive electronics inside a missile at the speed of light. That's a very attractive concept, though the power requirements and atmospheric challenges are immense.
And soft kill,
Yeah.
non-kinetic options.
Yes, things like targeted cyber attacks. Trying to disrupt the missile's command and control network, corrupt its navigation software, maybe spoof its sensors to make it think it's somewhere else, causing it to go off course or even self-destruct without a physical interception. These non-kinetic methods are becoming an increasingly important part of the defensive equation.
But hang on. We've heard so much about these things being invincible. Is that really true? Some analyses seem to push back on that narrative, suggesting current systems can pose a threat to them.
That is a critical counterpoint, and it's vital to get past the hype. The invincible label is largely rhetoric. Our sources, including defense analysis reports, indicate that the hypersonic weapons currently being developed or fielded by the US, Russia, and China, typically maxing out around Mach 10-12, they do slow down due to atmospheric drag.
Especially as they get lower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
During their glide phase, and particularly in their terminal dive, they lose significant speed. And analysis suggests they slow down enough that advanced versions of existing defense systems can intercept them.
Like which systems?
Specifically, upgraded versions of the Army's Patriot PAC-3 and the Navy's Aegis SM-6 interceptor. These systems have the required speed and agility, especially with modern sensor and software upgrades, to engage these targets as they slow down.
And we've seen real-world evidence of this.
The most striking example is Ukraine reportedly using U.S.-supplied PAC-3 systems to successfully shoot down multiple Russian Kinzhal missiles. Despite the Kinzhal's speed and claimed maneuvering, once it entered the Patriot's engagement envelope, it was vulnerable. This demonstrates pretty clearly that these weapons are not invincible.
So, ships equipped with modern Aegis aren't necessarily sitting ducks.
Not necessarily. Ship-based radars, especially advanced ones, can detect incoming hypersonic threats hundreds of kilometers out. Combined with capable interceptors like the latest SM-6 variants, they should have a credible defense capability against many current-generation hypersonic anti-ship missiles.
And there's a paradox here, right? If adversaries try to build even faster hypersonics to defeat these defenses,
They run smack into even worse heating problems, which, as we discussed, is already the single biggest engineering challenge. It becomes exponentially harder to manage the heat, maintain structural integrity, and ensure reliable guidance as you push speeds higher and higher towards, say, Mach 15 or 20. It's a punishing law of diminishing returns.
plus, aren't there older technologies that can mimic some hypersonic capabilities more cheaply?
That's another important point sources raise. Traditional ballistic missiles equipped with maneuverable re-entry vehicles, or MARVs, can achieve very high speeds and perform significant maneuvers during re-entry. In some scenarios, MARVs might even outperform current hypersonics in terms of sheer speed, and they often cost significantly less to develop and field. One CBO estimate suggested MARVs could be a third cheaper than hypersonics, while offering similar guidance and accuracy. So this strategic picture is much more nuanced than just hypersonics make defense impossible.
Okay, this technological race is undeniably reshaping military strategy, global power dynamics. What does it all mean for the future of warfare itself? And maybe more importantly, are there any realistic paths forward to try and mitigate these new, very serious risks?
Well, the emergence of hypersonic weapons definitely marks a new, more volatile era of strategic competition. The psychological impact alone is profound. As we touched on, the perception of losing a technological edge or gaining one can significantly damage a nation's psyche in the global power game. It can trigger reactive, even aggressive behavior as states scramble to maintain or restore perceived parity. This psychological dimension is a powerful, often underestimated driver of the current arms race.
And we're already seeing these weapons used, albeit sparingly. What do the sources suggest about their potential role in future conflicts?
Russia's use of Kinzhal in Ukraine is a clear signal used for strategic strikes, perhaps for psychological effect too. The sources also flagged that worrying potential for China possibly providing hypersonic tech to Pakistan for use against India, introducing this instability into a volatile region. And for China itself, these weapons offer, as one report states, enhanced options to rapidly target United States air, land, and naval forces in the Indo-Pacific.
Meaning?
Meaning, in a potential conflict over Taiwan or in the South China Sea, China could use hypersonics for rapid initial strikes against U.S. carriers, air bases, command centers, trying to degrade U.S. power projection capabilities right at the outset, maybe before the U.S. can fully respond.
That capacity for a swift, devastating strike with almost no warning, it really could incentivize a use-it-or-lose-it mentality in a crisis, couldn't it? Making escalation incredibly rapid and dangerous.
And that leads us straight into the ethical and moral dimensions, even if the sources frame it primarily in strategic terms. The radical compression of decision times inherently increases the risk of catastrophic miscalculation and accidental war. The payload ambiguity, conventional or nuclear, forces that impossible dilemma on the defender, creating an environment, as one source put it, ripe for misinterpretation. It directly shreds crisis stability.
It seems like the technology itself almost encourages preemptive thinking, launch-on-warning postures, creating this dynamic where everyone is constantly trying to get the first blow in. It feels like it could lead to a flash war decided in minutes based on potentially flawed data.
And compounding this risk is what some analysts call the entanglement problem, particularly in Russia and China. Their conventional and nuclear missile forces are often integrated under the same command structures, using similar or dual-capable missiles.
So if you detect a launch, you have even less idea of the intent or payload.
Exactly. It further complicates threat assessment in a time-critical situation.
Oh.
Now, some sources mention exploring AI artificial intelligence paired with air defense systems as a potential way to handle the sheer speed and complexity, maybe help determine threat nature and recommend responses faster than humans could.
But that opens a whole new can of worms, doesn't it? Ceding life-or-death decisions to algorithms.
A massive can of worms.
Oh.
While AI could theoretically process data faster and maybe reduce certain types of human error, poorly designed, biased, or unpredictable AI in a high-stakes crisis could create entirely new, potentially worse, failure modes. We simply don't understand enough about how complex AI would behave under such extreme pressure. The ethical questions are staggering.
Given all these dangers, this new reality, is there any hope for international cooperation, for arms control to somehow regulate this technology? Or are we just locked into a new, unrestrained arms race?
The current landscape for arms control is, frankly, bleak. The collapse of key treaties like the INF Treaty, the ABM Treaty, and the recent suspension of New START. It's removed crucial guardrails and undoubtedly fueled the current race.
Russia has said they want New START extended, maybe bring China in, but China's not interested.
China has consistently been reluctant, yeah. They argue their nuclear arsenal is much smaller than the U.S. and Russia's, and historically, they've avoided multilateral arms control commitments.
And controlling hypersonics specifically seems incredibly difficult anyway.
Far more complex than traditional ballistic missiles. How do you define limits? On speed, range, maneuverability. Many systems are dual-capable, conventional nuclear, and verification would be a nightmare. Plus, as we've discussed, the technology is proliferating beyond the big three. Any meaningful agreement would need to include India, Pakistan, France, Japan, maybe others. Getting consensus would be incredibly challenging. The genie is really out of the bottle.
So the Pandora's box can't be closed, as the sources suggest. What's the takeaway then?
The takeaway seems to be that while traditional arms control treaties might be difficult, the international community desperately needs to find new avenues for dialogue. Confidence-building measures, transparency initiatives, maybe establishing norms of behavior. Anything to reduce the risk of miscalculation and promote restrictions, even if formal treaties are elusive right now. We need ways to manage the danger, even if we can't eliminate the weapons.
You know, what strikes me most is that while the technology itself is stunning, the real impact of hypersonic weapons might be less about the physics of Mach 5 flight and more about the intense psychological pressure, the radical uncertainty, and the sheer decision-making strain they impose on leaders worldwide. It fundamentally changes the psychology of deterrence, conflict, and crisis management.
That's a really crucial point. And it raises a fundamental question for you, our listener. In a world where that line between conventional and nuclear war is becoming increasingly blurred, where devastating attacks can happen with only minutes of warning, how do nations maintain stability? How do we prevent stumbling into catastrophe through miscalculation or accident? The balance of power is undeniably shifting, and grappling with these complex questions is essential for navigating the dangerous world ahead.
That's all the time we have for this exploration of hypersonic missiles on the Global WarWatch Network. We certainly hope you feel more informed and better equipped to think critically about this incredibly important and, frankly, sobering topic.
And we genuinely encourage you to share your thoughts and perspectives in the comment section below. This is a conversation that needs to happen, and your input is valuable.
Absolutely. And if you found this discussion valuable, please do like, share, and subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network. It really helps us continue bringing you this kind of analysis. You can also join us on social media. All the links you need are right, though, in the description. Thank you for tuning in.